Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. If you didn't like our evaluation of Edge's career, fine, I understand, and you can add your thoughts on Roundtable Radio, 347-857-4647, Tuesdays at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. And you can also follow up later on the podcast, WrestlingRoundtablePodcast.com, or go into iTunes and type Wrestling Roundtable. Please share, rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to us, including this video too. Edge just retired, and we were going to couple that with the best and worst retirements, but then unfortunately, out of nowhere, Macho Man Randy Savage unfortunately died in a car accident, and I think the whole world felt it. Not even just wrestling fans, but it was all over the place. Because Macho Man was unique, wasn't he? He was just larger than life. He was like beyond wrestling. But what made him unique, Will?
Miss Elizabeth was probably one of the biggest things that made him stand out, besides his look and everything.
Well, she wasn't the typical jungle girl Moolah stuff.
She was not like any other female we've ever seen before, because she
was the first lady of wrestling.
First valet of wrestling, really. Didn't say much, didn't have to say much, but Macho would compliment with her, and she just came out there as supporting her guy. That's all she was there to do. She didn't get involved. One of the people that I think that made that character of Macho Man stand out, because the jealousy would come in.
I'd hardly call her the first valet, because even Woman was doing stuff in Florida with Kevin Sullivan, but those type of characters were more evil, more out there, and more provocative, where she was actually classy and quiet. She was different. What else made Macho Man unique?
His talent and his look. They stand out to me the most. Yeah, he was one of the better wrestlers of his generation, but his look, stringy hair, the bandana, the aviators, and the cape, I loved his. I loved his 80s look way more than I liked his 90s look.
We just talked about best and worst attire recently, and I said outfits designed by the same guy who did Jimi Hendrix stuff. Macho Man was one of the first people we mentioned.
He just had a keen understanding of what the fans wanted. He was the entertainer, and he kept that in mind all the time, and that's why he put everything together. The look, the voice,
his
the
matches.
ballet, the matches. He had the talent to back it up, too. He had the talk, and he had the talent to back it up. The total package that put it together for him.
Unlike what CNN Headline News said that weekend, that his career started in 1985, he was actually been wrestling for almost 10 years before that, and a lot of that was in ICW, which his father, Angelo Poffo, started, and his brother, Lanny Poffo, was in too, and it was almost like the ECW of its day. It was the real outlaw promotion, and it's great now that we're in the era of YouTube that you're able to look up this stuff and you see the crazy shit that they were doing. They were breaking kayfabe, challenging Jerry Lawler and Jarrett to fights and calling them out, saying their matches were fake and shit like that. Stuff that was never done before, and pile driving people through tables. And I think that really just exemplifies the intensity. That's the word that you hear all the time about Macho Man. His intensity brought him out. You hear all these wrestlers talking about him afterwards, and what are they saying? He was on 24/7. That was him. So maybe if it was a heart attack, we shouldn't be surprised in a way, but he seemed to calm down in his later years. But his wrestling years, even from all the way from ICW all the way up to WCW, he always seemed like he was just that far away from going legitimately insane. But before he went to WCW, he was kind of benched by Vince McMahon in '94. He was getting a little older. They were obviously switching over to the new generation of smaller wrestlers in the post-steroid time, and they wanted him to slow down, and they put him on commentary, which he had been doing on and off for a few years. So do you think Vince McMahon was wrong to bench him? Did he really have a lot more to offer? Did he prove that when he went to WCW?
He has so much more to offer. He wasn't done. Although, I think the commentary with him, Heenan, and sometimes Jim Ross or Vince was actually quite good. I actually thought he was kind of entertaining as a commentator. Again, the voice, it just stands out.
They're hanging from the Raptors here in Caesars. They don't have Raptors, but if they did, they would be hanging from them.
That was great. There was some great stuff that he did in commentary, but at the time, WCW was not growing. Well, it was growing, but it wasn't there
It was
yet.
changing.
It was changing, that's for sure, but it wasn't quite there yet. And I don't think he needed Randy to be on the wrestling show, per se, to do it. The moment WCW started getting that steam, that's where I would have said
He was part of it.
Macho should have been back on the TV set. He's like, look, we have Macho Man back in the ring. I was like, ooh, let's go watch that. It was too late. Macho knew that. I was like, I got more I got to do in my life.
Whereas Warrior, when he came back in '96, he seemed kind of out of place, like a relic. Imagine if Savage was tearing it up with Michaels in his prime and Bret Hart when they were main eventers. But do you think that Savage had a lot more to offer?
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot more offer, but he was so good on commentary. It was kind of hard, like, to justify not putting him on commentary. Early Wallace, he was great on him.
Yeah.
They always kept it real, those ex-wrestlers.
They did. And you know what's good, too? Like, there a lot of times he would get involved, too. Not only just being commentary, but he would go in the ring, get involved.
Yeah.
Like, the whole Crush
You
thing
mean
with that
WrestleMania 10?
storyline. Yeah, with the storyline, going with Crush.
If after any point, let's say after WCW or maybe even after TNA in 2003, the story with that is that he really didn't feel up to speed and he didn't want to embarrass himself, so he kind of backed away. But if Savage at any point, let's say in the past decade, had come back to the WWF, what would you have liked to have seen him do?
I think we're all in agreement that he had so much left in the tank, he could have been a main eventer. He got bigger when he went to WCW. He was still going off the top rope. He still had the personality. He never lost it.
Well, he ended up paying for that in 98 with those surgeries on his knees that slowed him down. But if he's inducted next year, which I'm fully expecting in the WWE Hall of Fame now, who do you think should be involved? Who should accept? Who should induct him? Hogan and Luger?
I mean,
I'm sure he'd love that.
if Hogan can't, Luger is, I think, somewhat involved with WWE now a little bit, but I think DDP should be the one that should induct him. The feud that they had in WCW was probably one of the standout feuds. Of the 10 top, I would say that was one of them. Really, DDP was handpicked by Macho to feud with them, and I thought they had a great chemistry. DDP should be the one, because, I mean, Hogan's not around. You can't really induct him. I don't know who would be in WWF right now that could do it.
I'm sure a lot of people would say Steamboat.
The genius Lanny Poffo, his brother, he's got to be the one.
He should accept it. I think he should accept it.
I think he should bring him in, do a poem, and his wife should accept it, just like they did with Kurt Hennig. That's what I mean. I can't.
I should see a poem.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do a poem, and his wife accept it. I can't imagine anyone else doing it and me being happy with it.
Well, before we move on to some of our favorite matches and moments, one last question on looking back on Randy Savage's whole career and what he really meant to wrestling. What was that? What did he mean to wrestling? Because the outpouring across generations and across industries, people in sports, MMA, even outside of that in entertainment, they knew who this guy was. So he was on that Hogan level of above wrestling in a way. He was bigger than that. Why was that? What did he mean to everybody?
He was not only an icon of wrestling, but he stepped out of the wrestling world and brought a presence to him. It was just like a marketing aspect of that character, that voice, the look.
Something appealed to
something
people
just
universally.
appealed. It just works, you know. You can't plan that. Vince didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to make this guy do Slim Jim commercials and all that." He didn't plan that. You know, people went to him and were like, "Yo, we want to use your talent, your voice. We want to use your presence to build on that." And he could sell any product. He could take this cup and Wrestling Road Diaries. He could make that the best DVD of all time because of the way he promoted it.
And already it's the best DVD of all time.
It is. There you go.
He did sell for Peter Parker and
Yes.
Spider-Man.
So yeah, exactly. Bonesaw is ready. Yeah.
Bonesaw is ready. I love it. There's a YouTube video where he just does that for a minute, just over and over and over.
I want to see that.
Oh man, he had something that appealed to the general public, not just wrestling fans, and it was just that personality, that larger than life image, that comic book villain or hero that he projected, that appealed to the masses. That's really what why he was able to transcend wrestling and get that broad-based appeal out there.
Bill Simmons, a writer on ESPN.com, who always likes to reference wrestling from the 80s, made a great point when he said when wrestling got really, really big, all these people would jump on the bandwagon. Everybody loved Hogan. But for all the people who were there before the big jump, they all like say, well, screw you guys. You guys are like the Johnny-come-latelys. You just like it. So all the true wrestling fans needed a new hero. Macho Man fit the bill because he was a great wrestler, over the top, and was just amazing all around in looks and everything. To the true wrestling fans, Macho Man was always our guy.
Baseball may have been his first passion and what he wanted to do when he was younger, but the amount of dedication that he put into wrestling, whether it was speaking, his outfits, his matches, like I said, he was just 1,000% full speed ahead on everything, and I think it really showed in a lot of his work, and that's why we have so much of it to talk about, and we're going to keep talking about it some more, because when we come back, our favorite matches and moments from the Macho Man Randy Savage. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. You can support the show as well by getting the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt available at our store at Wrestling Roundtable. And hey, if you want to get anything off Amazon.com, we have an Amazon store as well. So check that out at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Orlando and Rodney rejoining the panel, and I did mention the radio show on before, and I'm sure we're going to follow up some more because there's so much to say. How do you sum up this guy's, 30-year, whatever career in just 20 minutes? And there's so many moments and matches, but let's start off somewhere. What are some of your favorite moments from Macho Man's career?
One of my favorite moments was the promo after he attacked the Warrior the first time with Ted DiBiase, going crazy, and he was walking out of frame while he was looking up and still talking. It was like one of my favorite things to watch. I laugh at that promo all the time. That will be the day the Macho, and he's like walking off camera looking up like this, and he just kept walking and talking. Because you notice that every time when he left camera, he would always be talking in the background. And WrestleMania
No more questions!
Yeah, the snake bite from Jake Roberts was one of mine because that was one of the first times I was watching wrestling.
It's still hard to watch.
It's hard to watch that. It's like, I can't believe he actually would allow that to happen.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a great starting point of the fact that Savage would put over people by selling, or as Triple H would say, showing ass, I suppose. But he would get his ass handed to him, or something terrible would happen to him to get heat on the heel, and he would be selfless like that. He would sacrifice, whether it was DDP dressed as La Parka and Diamond.
That was amazing.
Whether it was DDP dressed... Fuck! You threw me off there.
I was like, out of my head.
DDP dressed as La Parka and diamond cutting Savage, whether it was Crush Gorilla pressing Savage onto the rail and making it seem like his teeth got all mashed up. Savage would sell for a lot of guys and stuff. NWO made like a mockery of him beating him up for all those months with the yellow streak and spray painting his head. And
outlining his body with the spray paint.
Man. They got so much heat by doing that, but what are some of your favorite moments with Macho Man?
The snake bite, watching that as a kid, that scared the hell out of me.
out.
Watching Liz go crazy, and even Roddy Piper ran down from the commentating booth to save her. WrestleMania 7, that was kind of like the soap opera moment with Savage and Liz reuniting. I remember my mom watching that, and she cried.
Everybody cried.
That was the perfect moment. Even though he retired, that was the perfect way for him to end that part of his career.
What about the heel turn on Hulk Hogan on Saturday Night's Main Event in '89 when the jealousy boiled over? Building up all this year with teaming with Hogan and then the jealousy coming up, and then when he attacked him backstage, it looked legit.
real.
You know, it wasn't so much the contrived cameras in the back. People were talking acting stuff they do now. They were following this angle that happened where she got accidentally hurt. Hogan's there. Savage just lost his mind and brutally attacked him, and people came in to stop it. It was really good.
The thing that you guys talked about last segment was like what makes Macho Man so special, and like to talk about all these feuds and moments that every feud he had, he really made it personal. Like he did, he showed ass. He really put over the other character to make you really intrigued by the match and the build-up and everything.
Even when he was the aggressor, you know,
Even when he was the aggressor, between WCW and WWF and anything like that. But I guess to go off of the WrestleMania 7 moment was the next pay-per-view after that when Liz and Macho Man finally got married. Even on Superstars when he proposed. And
SummerSlam 91.
Oh, yeah. The video package leading up to that, and just thinking now if they had a marriage after a main event with involving Ultimate Warrior, Psycho Sid, and Hulk Hogan, and to have them a marriage in Madison Square Garden, and people just cheering because of the history with these people.
It's just amazing that a wedding could be a main event of
and it felt like a true wedding. There's no storyline. There's no. It's not like a goofy wedding that you'll see now. It actually meant something.
After all those years together on and off, and it culminating with WrestleMania 7, that was just the perfect captain. I guess it really is the match made in heaven now. Tasteless joke, I know. There is no heaven. But moving on. Some of your favorite Macho Man matches.
I was actually in the Garden for WrestleMania 10, him and Crush. That was a moment because I got to see it on a pay-per-view scale. Of
His last WrestleMania.
His last WrestleMania match. Wow. So that, for me, great. It was a weird how they did the match, the way they did it with like 60-second return to the ring. It was a false count anywhere, but they did it a little differently. But it was still good. He was running around, I think, in the theater, and he was running around the arena doing things. And him and Flair, WrestleMania 8 was one of my favorites. The outfit, winning the title, it was just a awesome moment, great match.
Him and Hogan at Madison Square Garden about 1985. It was a great brawl back and forth.
Yeah, when he came in initially, he was being positioned going against Hulk Hogan, and they really didn't go full bore into that a few years later.
And it's a house show, so Hogan was beating everybody at the house shows, doing poses afterwards, but Hogan beat Savage by DQ, and they were still going at it. The wrestlers had to come. That's how you knew that they really had something for Savage. Hogan didn't go over him clean. He still looks strong. His character still looks strong. That was a really good match.
WrestleMania 7, Savage and Warrior, the fact that he dropped all those elbows and still putting away Warrior, just his facials tell you like how emotionally he involved, and he really involved the fans too into that match. But not only that, but a year and a half later when they had that match at SummerSlam 92, even though the match didn't have a clean finish, I thought it had a great athleticism. It was a back and forth match, just a story. They put these two together and they made something of it. It actually got me into amateur wrestling, that match. Really? It was so good.
I think it's still underrated just because Davey and Brett were the main event. If Davey and Brett didn't wrestle on that card, we'd still be talking about
I think that's what helped made that card so good.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely an underrated match, I think, that a lot of people don't talk about. Because they always talk about the first one, but the second one I thought was still a lot of back and forth, the Flair.
And Hennig.
We were wondering what was going on with Flair and Hennig, the whole build-up between those two. It was good, they got one apiece, so it kind of tied up their situation.
Before we get skinned alive for not immediately mentioning WrestleMania III and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the Intercontinental title match. Well, it's not that it's obvious. It should be mentioned. Yeah. There's so many obvious ones with Macho Man. It's like, where do you start? WrestleMania 5 with Hulk Hogan. That was a great build-up and great blow-off. But as for WrestleMania 3, the match that Jesse Ventura recently said was the best match he ever called, and you'd think so. It is definitely one of the best matches of all time. Just the pace. Constant near falls, a year's worth of build-up, and they definitely did steal the show, which set the template of everyone else trying to steal the show. But one thing I want to point out about that is Steamboat would say he's always asked about that match, even though he had classics just a couple years later with Ric Flair, which were also great in of themselves, but he and Flair would go out not having anything but the finish. So it was all on the fly. Whereas Savage planned out every match move for move like that, at least on a major scale. And in that sense, he thought it was a little better than the Savage match because they improv'd in a way. But I don't think it really matters. If it's, the fans don't know that when you're watching.
It's not what we
it's
think
execution. It's not how you plan it.
Right.
Yeah. In wrestling, you plan out your beginning and ending, but a lot of it's a lot of ad-lib on the moment. That match particularly was just so well-paced, a great ending to a great feud. What stinks about that is that Steamboat didn't get much after that. Kind of lost a little bit. I think.
Well, that's their fault, WWE.
Yeah, that's their fault. But I think Savage stood out more than Steamboat in that match, if anything.
That match is kind of what the modern era of professional wrestling is based on, Savage, Steamboat, because that's what all of the wrestlers who are wrestling now that grew up on. They love Savage, Steamboat. Yeah. If you read Jericho's book, he's a big fan of both of them. A lot of the wrestlers today look at that match and kind of take from that match and put it in their style today.
I just wish people would talk about IC title matches like that. I couldn't tell you who the IC champion is right now.
Well, there's a lot more matches and moments that we should be getting to, but I mentioned Roundtable Radio before. I'm sure we'll follow up and add some more and get your thoughts as well. But before we move on, I wanted to at least mention his match against DDP at Spring Stampede 97. Yeah. We were just talking off camera about that great DDP Savage feud in WCW, and unfortunately, especially when people are doing retrospectives like they are now, a lot of his WCW work gets overlooked, which is unfortunate. I thought his stuff in 96 with Flair and Elizabeth turning heel was great. The NWO stuff when he joined, but that segues into the DDP feud, which was incredible and made DDP a star, which Savage intended to do. And that match, I thought, not only was great because it main evented the show in an era with Hogan and those sort of guys. Savage and DDP went on, and they had a really good match, clean finish, and it really put DDP over, and I think it gets lost in the mix.
They had 3 great matches that year. I particularly liked the Halloween Havoc match that they had.
The brawl, right?
Yeah, the brawl, and they wrestled all over the arena, and even when Miss Elizabeth was out there, and I think this is the first time Kimberly actually came out, and she kind of tussled with Miss Elizabeth to kind of pull that storyline into play. Even though Savage went over not cleanly, but I think that feud with DDP made DDP into a star. I think DDP has a lot to thank Macho Man for, which he still does.
Yeah, they brought a lot of things out, especially like the Playboy thing they brought out. Yeah. That was like, wow.
Uncensored.
Not very uncensored. They put the NWO right over the whole thing. It was
the whole thing?
Almost the whole thing. But it was, that's one that I love. What's wrong with it?
Well, we can't let a talk about the Macho Man go without our favorite Macho Man promos. There's so many. What are your favorite lines from Macho Man? And I want to hear your Macho Man voice. Everyone has one.
Dig it! Macho Man, dig it. I know Oh Yeah is the famous one, but dig it! That just stood out for me.
Macho Man is always one of those guys where you don't even know what his real voice sounds like.
That is his real voice.
I was thinking before, has this guy ever been out of character? Because he's a guy who doesn't need to scream for attention. He can talk like this and get everyone's attention. Dig.
And like everyone who ever met him was expecting the same thing, and then, oh, that's his real voice?
Yeah, he had classic. It's really hard to pinpoint. And we mentioned stuff with WCW before. 96, I would say, feud with Flair when he was banned from the buildings. Helter Skelter, yeah! And saying he was going to drag a dead partner to the ring because the partners at Slamboree. Yeah, I believe it was. But one in particular, what I guess you could count as a promo, was his 1989 appearance on Arsenio Hall. And my God, this guy is always
but they gave me PMS.
promoting his match at WrestleMania 5. Well, I don't exactly have chopped liver, huh? And then someone clouds like, somebody likes chopped liver. And he was just so funny, but he never breaks out of his character. He's always on.
Quick-witted.
Yeah, Macho Man, I tell you, this guy would never be duplicated.
I think it goes back to intensity, because one of the ones that stand out to me, and this is a moment too, I suppose, would be the Rumble 91, because he had been attacking and goading the Warrior for months about getting a title shot. And then he sent out Sensational Sherry, of all people, to do his dirty work for him, and she's on her knees begging Warrior, no!
She even kisses him.
They cut to the back, and Savage is freaking out in the locker room because he was watching it, and all he said was, he said no! He said no! That's all he said. And he just got that right across. He ran out, and of course, we
ran
know
to
the
the
finish.
crowd.
Yeah. Just a great, intense moment.
WrestleMania 8, after he beat Flair for the
yeah, that
belt,
was a great
he was
promo.
like ripping his shirt off.
I'll tell you
He's
exactly
like,
what he
"Mad
said,
at
because
me,
it was
Gene."
great.
Yeah.
Again, only a few words, but they stood out. He gave the belt to Elizabeth. This is for you. Take it and go. And this is for you, Ric Flair. Incredible. What about, I'm hanging 10 on the wave of the future? No one remembers that one?
No.
Oh, I just made it up. It sounded like something he would say. I just made it up.
It sounded like something he would say.
But I like the danger zone, west of London, England, east of the Pacific, south of Mars, and north of hell. Just
Man,
incredible.
he was on fire, man. The one promo that they cut, it was him, Sherry, and Zeus. Before their cage match with Beefcake and Hogan.
You should call that the stable, right?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about three psychos. I just watched her recently, and I was like scared for Hogan. You have to fear for Hogan watching these three psychos that actually have a cage in the promo.
Yeah.
So Sherry's climbing up, Zeus is pulling it, and Savage has his arm through as if he's trying to get to the camera. And you actually have to like back up from the screen when you watch this because you don't know if these guys are gonna come to the screen.
Cartoony and somewhat over the top, but you felt it. It was very real in the sense in this cartoon world of wrestling, as Bret Hart likes to call it.
Leading up to WrestleMania 5, WWF Primetime, him and Hogan were supposed to have a debate, but he wound up doing it. Yeah, exactly. Vince McMahon was supposed to, they were supposed to have a debate, yes. If you YouTube it. But Macho Man's doing backstage and he's holding the title. He's wearing these see-through shades and he's talking quiet and he's going through the back. So he's like, Hogan, you interfered in my matches. You wanted Liz. And if you look at his eyes just bugged out the whole time. And I just thought that was one of his best promos.
More proof that the one thing missing from promos right now in wrestling compared to the 80s, cocaine. But all kidding aside, the Macho Man meant a lot to us as wrestling fans and a lot to wrestling itself, whether you're a wrestler, whether you're backstage. And he went beyond wrestling, so it was a real hard loss to take. It wasn't the typical wrestling death that I guess we're kind of used to. And he was a guy that people say, like Jericho recently said, you didn't appreciate until you realized he was gone because he'd been gone for so many years. I don't think we could say that because we've brought him up many times on the show.
We said how many times if Raw started, his music kicked in, would we be attached to that screen?
One of the guys you never thought would die. It's like one of the guys you never thought would perish. Like it's like he's such a big star, superhero. He gets all realism back in wrestling where we lose that superhero-ness sometimes. With him passing, that was how I felt. I felt like a superhero mind passed. Like, and you didn't think that it would ever happen.
Yeah.
And he left during a good time in his career, so everybody thought he was just going to grow old and just fade away, which is great because not a lot of wrestlers you see now retire and actually stay retired. They always come back, but Savage actually stayed away, remarried, living a good life, and to see him go away like that is just tragic.
He was just starting getting back up with the W All-Stars, our relationship back with WWE. It's a shame. And with Mattel and all that, so it's a shame that it could have maybe gone full board.
Well, unfortunately, Macho Man will never come back, but we're never going to forget him because he may have been the Macho Man Randy Savage, but to me, he's always going to be the Macho King. He's the king of wrestling, and all we can do now is look back on, but we're going to keep him alive in our memories. Moving on, next week, we're going to talk about MMA, so start your hate already. It's going to be an all-mixed martial arts show, looking back at UFC, the early years, and the career of Randy the Natural Couture. So for the panel of James Pagaligan, Will Brooks, Will Vafidas, Martin and Rodney LeConte, Orlando O'Neill, I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Thank you and join us next week.